Hi, folks. We're just giving people a few seconds to log in. You can find a little bit of information in the chat about tonight's book and a special coupon code while we wait to get started. Just a few more seconds. Good evening and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. We're excited to host tonight's event with Shih and Umansky presenting their new book, Koji Alchemy, Rediscovering the Magic of Mold-Based Fermentation. Joining them in a panel discussion are fellow NYC fermenters, Cheryl Paswater and Ann Yonetani. Our moderator for the evening is fermented food educator, Mark Phillips, so you're in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to everyone for making this happen and to all of you for showing up. Greenlight's storefronts are currently closed and locked, but our community is still here. Now, just a couple of housekeeping things. First, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see or hear you. They can see your name in our attendee list, and they'll see your name when you comment in chat or ask questions in our Q&A. If you scroll to the bottom of your window, if you're on the laptop, or I think it'll be at the top of your window if you're on an iPad, you'll see a couple different icons. One of them is labeled chat. In this window, you can sort of comment any thoughts throughout the event, say hello to the authors, provide applause if you'd like to. We have another window down here that's labeled Q&A. That is where we'll be pulling questions from at the end of the event for our audience Q&A. So if you have any questions at any point throughout the discussion, you can go ahead and type them up there. And if you see anyone's question in that window that you would really like to hear answered, you can go ahead and upvote it so that it appears at the top of our screen when we're pulling those. We are recording tonight's event, so look for video or audio versions on our website and social media channels later on. And finally, the reason we are all here tonight, books. Tonight's featured book is Koji Alchemy. It's available for sale from greenlightbookstore.com. Though our stores are closed, we're working with our supplier. You can see it right there on some of our screens. We're working with our supplier warehouse for fast direct-to-home shipping. If you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to show your support. And we're offering $5 off on the featured book when you purchase from Greenlight's website within a week. Look for the coupon code in the chat. Our panelists for this evening are Shih, Umansky, Cheryl Paswater, and Ann Yonetani. Shih is one of the leading culinary explorers of koji and miso in the United States and an in-demand food preservation consultant. He is also the exhibit engineer for the Museum of Food and Drink based in New York City. Umansky is the chef owner of Larder, a curator, delicatessen, and bakery in Cleveland, Ohio, nominated by the James Beard Foundation as the best new restaurant in America in 2019. He's been featured in numerous publications like Bon Appetit and Savior, and was named the Deli Prophet by Food and Wine. Cheryl Paswater is the Chief Fermentationist and CEO of Contraband Ferments, as well as an educator, artist, and writer. She co-organizes the NYC Fermentation Festival and is an organizer of the NYC Ferments Meetup. She's a contributing writer for Edible Magazine, as well as a contributor to the book Miso Tempeh Natto, and is currently working on her first book on fermentation. Ann Yonetani is a microbiologist and founder of NYrture New York Natto, which produces natto in NYC. She's on a mission to bring this often feared functional ferment to America's table. Our moderator for this evening is Mark Phillips. He's a writer, musician, and fermented food educator based in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. He teaches vegetable fermentation, koji, and miso, and is a team member at Hosta Hill, a Berkshires-based producer of sauerkraut, kimchi, and hot sauce. They'll be discussing Rich and Jeremy's new book, Koji Alchemy, the first book devoted to processes, concepts, and recipes for fermenting and culturing foods with koji, the microbe behind the delicious umami flavors of soy sauce, miso, mirin, and so many of the ingredients that underpin Japanese cuisine. Mark will kick off our panel discussion, and then all our panelists will be talking with all of you. Mark, please take it away.
Sweet. Thank you, Chelsea, for that amazing introduction. Thank you, Greenlight Books, for hosting these events. Pretty awesome to be able to gather with you guys virtually. Hello, good evening. How's everyone doing? You're all muted, but give me a thumbs up. First of all, congratulations on this amazing, beautiful book. I just wanted to start with that. Pretty awesome. You guys now are officially legit. You were almost legit before. Now it's official because you wrote a book. So I wanted to just kick us off and maybe just have everybody share briefly where they're streaming from. And I'd love to hear the last koji derived food or ingredient or beverage that you consumed. And Ann, do you want to start us off? Oh, mute. You're muted still.
Sorry.
There you go.
I'm Ann, and I'm calling in from New York City. And the last koji food that I ate was some of my very own koji natto. I had that this morning on some toast with some peanut butter.
Amazing. You're going to have to tell us what that is at some point.
Yep, will do.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Cheryl, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, hi. Cheryl Paswater. I'm in Brooklyn, New York. And I run Contraband Ferments. Koji. Wow, what have I been? I made some vegan mac and cheese using some of my fermented tasty paste as part of the base. And what else have I been doing with koji? Oh, I cured some pork chops last week.
Amazing. Thank you.
Of course.
Rich, where are you coming in from?
I'm just north of Boston, and the last koji thing that I ate was some misozuke carrots that I had made for that presentation for preserving abundance. Julia Skinner's thing with Root Kitchen, so I enjoyed that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
And that was
Jeremy.
Go-In Foods miso, Nick's miso.
Oh, nice. Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Umansky. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, and I literally just ate some koji like an hour and 15 minutes ago. Just
Nice.
out of the incubator and just ate some.
Perfect.
It's delicious.
It's so good. Awesome. Well, that's great. Thanks, everybody. Welcome. And yeah, we have, so just to reiterate, folks at home, we're going to do a discussion until about 8:15, and then we'll transition to a Q&A. So at 8:15, I'll transition into that. You guys can populate your questions. So if you're asking a question and we're not getting to it, just know that at 8:15, we're going to open it back up for that. So yeah, I want to start with the basics, defining what koji is. If Rich or Jeremy, you want to jump in and give us kind of a introduction for those who don't know or want a refresher.
Yeah, I'll start. I think both of us can take it. Grossly, if we look at the history of food and cuisine worldwide, koji is essentially the most important food ingredient to the most amount of people that have ever lived on the planet. And I really don't think that's understating it based on population centers and what cultures used it. To simplify it, it is a mold that grows on starchy substances and produces all these fabulous enzymes, these specialized proteins that do wonderful things to make our food either sweeter or create sweetness out of it, or more umami, delicious, or make it more aromatic. It's absolutely incredible.
Awesome.
Rich?
Amazing. Anyone else want to fill in on that?
So I think from the standpoint of, a Japanese application, it's typically a grain or soybean. But if you or if you want to talk about, whether it's miso or soy sauce, you can have different mediums. So if we're talking more about a soy sauce medium, it's the usage of a mixture of soybeans and toasted cracked wheat that you would grow the mold on, in opposed to just a straight up starchy substance. So we often talk about rice koji because it's the easiest to grow koji on, because it's the easiest to access for the mold itself to infiltrate. But there are other mediums that are typically grown on that would be considered a koji that isn't necessarily a straight grain.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Ann or Cheryl, you guys want to jump in?
I kind of think of koji as the yeast of the East, here in America, most people are familiar with Saccharomyces cerevisiae, otherwise known as bakers or brewers or budding yeast, depending on who you are. And that's really like kind of the core workhorse, or one of the core workhorses of Western fermentation. But yeah, koji or Aspergillus oryzae is just so central to Japanese washoku cuisine, like building basic core staple foods like miso, soy sauce, sake, mirin, amazake, the list goes on. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. Cheryl, do you want to add anything in?
No, I mean, I think Jeremy and Ann really nailed it on the head. It's I follow their sentiments about koji. It's just magic in so many ways.
Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, I wanted to start with that just to clarify, and for folks at home who are wanting more, hopefully this presentation will fill in the blanks, and you can also Google koji and spend 4 hours introducing yourself to it if you want. So Rich and Jeremy, I wanted to talk to you guys both a little bit about the book and what your experience was like producing this book, and maybe some things that you learned along the way. Whichever one of you wants to jump in and start.
I can hop in first. I think, yeah, I mean, in terms of us meeting, it was just a matter of, being on forums like this where you get to interact with all sorts of people through social media in different ways. And since I started working with food in general and just trying to understand more about it, I've often reached out to people through whatever media was available to me. And social media was just so convenient to be able to reach somebody from literally across the world who's working on something very similar to what you're working on, and you could just interact with them, ask them questions, see what they're doing, understand more about their background and how they got there, or just see something that's super delicious or super inspiring and say, hey, how did you make that? And I think that was just kind of the planting of a bunch of seeds for me and all this learning. And that's how I connected to Jeremy, and I watched his TED Talk, and his way of understanding mushrooms really blew my mind in terms of his idea of them being sentient beings and all this crazy interconnectivity. And I feel that's a very similar thing in terms of this interconnectivity of people. Is if you think about it as this huge network of mycelium, as in when koji is growing, it's a very similar idea, being able to connect and I guess, in a way nourish each other. And that's how we kind of came to be in terms of, understanding that each other had these ideas, and they were interesting, and helped each other develop our own ideas and move past that, and continue to grow with this sort of mutual interest and, community that helps each other. It's this beautiful thing that is unique to people who are in fermentation, and in general people who cook and feed people, because that's the one thing that cooks do, is they take care of people. And I think that's one of the things that really interested me, and that's all the sentiments here for the people involved with food. And so that's how we got connected, is that we just really love making food and sharing food with people. And Koji is just a really easy way to make super delicious food with very little effort.
Mm. Awesome.
So yeah, Rich and I, we linked up through the virtual world. That's how we met. We became friends. Him and I were talking with somebody the other day, and I referred to our relationship as a romance, and look how red he's getting. It completely is in the brotherly love sense. We meshed incredibly well, linking up through a virtual platform where we could see what each other was working on, and almost like Rich would post something or share it with me via email or that sort of thing. And with him being, hundreds of 500, almost 600 miles away from me, I could like smell and taste and feel what he was making. We just really clicked. And it reinforced even further when Cynthia Graber, who's a great woman, her and Nicola Twilley have this great podcast called Gastropod that everybody should listen to. But Cynthia wrote an article about the work that I was doing for the great people over at America's Test Kitchen, like Cooks Illustrated. And she had previously just finished an article that ran in the Boston Globe about Rich and his work and his misos. And, at that point, Rich and I were very cordial, and we were communicating a lot. But she came to Cleveland, and she was like, you and Rich, like, you guys are going to be best friends. Like, you really gotta do it. So we did it. As we kind of moved along too, it became very apparent to us that finding information about Koji that wasn't relegated to academia, specifically academia that was in English too, like there was virtually none. And the information that is out there is very a lot of industrial applications, different types of biodigesting and synthesizing enzymes for detergents and that sort of thing. It wasn't practical to what we wanted to work on. We decided that we had to figure out a way to get what we were doing, what our colleagues were doing, and our take on how we were working with this mold out. And that's how this idea for the book was born. At first we talked about, well, maybe let's just do it as like a living website. We just always post things down. And then we were like, well, if we're writing all these lengthy blog posts and these Instagram posts and all this stuff, like, let's make a book. Let's just do an actual book. And this way, it would have longevity. A book can live digitally. It can live in the analog, in the real world, and it'd be that much more useful. So.
Awesome. So are you guys, I guess you're still friends after you wrote the book?
Yeah, we're working on book number 2.
Oh, okay.
It's a little preemptive, but yes.
It's starting
it's
early.
a secret.
Wow.
We told the publisher already. They're
All right. Well, this is about the first book, just to be clear.
Yes.
So yeah, the book is chock full of so many interesting things, and just to kind of follow that stream, filled with community. Clearly, there's so many different sections that pull directly from other people in the fermentation world, in the culinary world. So I'm wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about the community process and the community around Koji, and how you kind of pulled information in from everywhere.
So I think it's sort of this extension of our interaction with each other. It was just part of the landscape of interacting with all these other folks. Is we were already part of a community that was sharing about food in general and cooking and fermentation, and then, you know, obviously more into Koji because we were just obsessed with it and posting everything we could possibly do, and wanting to see other people work on them. And it was just a natural extension of all these people who are providing us with these amazing ideas. And then, you know, not much after I started learning about Koji and feeling that, you know, people were responsive, you know, we saw a need for us to teach it. And, you know, then we just started doing workshops, and I would just find friends' restaurants who were already interested in making Koji and show up there and have a bunch of people come and learn exactly what it is we were investigating. And actually those, you know, particular events were a lot of really great connection points. Because, you know, both Cheryl and Mark, both of you guys came to my class, and that was like amazing. And we were able to talk more in depth about what our stories were and what our, you know, what we really enjoyed and appreciated about what each of us is doing. And I think having that interpersonal connection extended the network even further of like all these people that you know and you have met in person. It creates that much a stronger connection. I mean, you know, I've met everybody who's on this panel in person, and it's just so cool to be able to understand more about you as people and where your heart is with things, and having that connection outside of the social media is great, but we are connected because of social media. And I think that's the key behind it, is that we can create things in this, you know, virtual platform to identify folks who are doing similar things and have similar understanding, and we can all actually just meet each other. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because there's no way that we would have all met each other without this social media vehicle. And having that as the key to like this greater network of being able to connect with people, and, you know, not just with Koji, but, you know, beyond that is what the reasons behind, you know, Koji builds community, or, you know, any sort of forum where we get together and talk about things that are of mutual interest and wanting to grow. So
Awesome. Yeah, I love the community spirit. Jeremy, do you have any comments about the community sourcing process?
Yeah, you know, it's I think it's a lot of times, especially in the restaurant world, things tend to be fairly closed off. Historically speaking, you know, such and such a chef has their secret recipe, or even, you know, in our families, grandma or grandpa has their secret recipe and takes it to the grave, and the rest of the family is always like, I wish I had that cookie recipe or that meatloaf recipe. You know, we can only remember it. We can't enjoy it any further. You know, and in the restaurant industry too, like chefs have been so guarded that what's mine is mine and is what makes my business successful. Rich and I are diametrically opposed to those points of view. And we feel that, you know, sharing and everybody being able to enjoy things is much more beneficial. And it actually pushes the person that would want to hide and hold something back to try to stay a step ahead and continue to innovate and be more creative and just get their juices flowing and put more information out there. You know, so as we kind of set out to identify some people that we wanted to be in the book, you know, there was we realistically, in, X amount of pages that we were contracted for with our publisher, with Chelsea Green, we can only fit so much in that book. The contract is only for so many words. So we were limited in a real sense in that way. We were also limited in some ways too, where some people didn't have time to, participate in something like this. Other people didn't want to, so we reached out to a broad, a really large amount of people just to see who was interested. And, based on who got back to us and, some of the personal stories that like we thought were really interesting, or, coming at things almost from a different, not a direction that was counter to what we were presenting in the book, but just a different angle. There's a couple contributors in there that are like, listen, I love Koji, but I don't think it's always to be used all the time for everything. We wanted to make sure that we had that wide variety of voices in there too. So, just being able to use, these technologies we have available to us these days, the social media platforms, and, as Rich said, be able to meet and interact with people from all over the world, all walks of life, doing all sorts of different things. Like this book would have been a 40-year odyssey if we didn't have those technological resources, to be able to have the resources and for me to, take a trip to see you or Ann or Cheryl. And, it would have taken a lot longer to be able to do this. So having that as a tool has been just indispensable in this journey for us.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Thank you. Yeah, it's really cool as a reader to be reading through your writing and then to come across a section and it's this like new perspective from another person. And what's cool for me is, as somebody who's pretty active on Instagram, almost all the people I'm encountering in the book are people that I already follow or know, so yeah, really love it and certainly appreciate it. I think it adds a lot of value to the reading experience, and no doubt is clear that the learnings in the book have been a crowdsourced effort.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And, along those lines too, Rich and I decided to go with Chelsea Green for various reasons. They're an employee-owned company. They're a small outlet in Vermont. Like everybody is like super vested in what they do. They use renewable resources to print the books and all this stuff. But on top of that, they keep the books continually in print, which was something that was really attractive to us. And we could always have this book out there for people. And hopefully in a couple of years, like, let's say we decide to do a revised and updated edition in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, whatever it is, then we're going to be able to have something from Ann in there and Cheryl and you and like all these other, hopefully this book can actually be, as time goes on, a living, breathing entity that just continues to evolve. And, who knows, maybe one day the role that Rich and I have is moderating the conversation and like introducing more people as opposed to us having the conversation. So we were really excited too that Chelsea Green as a publisher is they're into that sort of thing. And they can see, long-term viability with things along those lines and much bigger picture. So.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing that I'd like to note about Chelsea Green is they let us write the book that we wanted to write. That was one thing that, we, going through and seeking out different publishers, what we wanted, our voices to be heard in the way that we wanted to tell our story and share the information. And they were amazing about that. I mean, I was working on things down to the last minute, and and they just let me continue because they knew it was important in terms of, this particular subject. It's the key is that not a lot of people know about it, and to have the information be as accurate as possible was really important to us. And through them, they understood that. They understood that, people don't really know about Koji. And if we put something in there that isn't quite, accurate, it might be it might be interpreted in a way that wouldn't be good for people in their learning process. So we were really very intentional about assuring that, all the information we have is as good as we could, make it with our knowledge and the combined knowledge of all the people who contributed, and also all the people who reviewed the book as well. So
yeah,
that was
awesome.
pretty cool.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's 8 o'clock and we got about 15 more minutes before we dive into Q&A, and I wanted to jump over to Ann and Cheryl and weave in their knowledge and expertise, both amazing fermented food educators and entrepreneurs too. And I was wondering, Ann, if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about actually some of the science behind what's going on with Koji. And I just left out is also a microbiologist and the owner of NYrture Natto. And I think most people maybe know you as the Natto lady, which is a different food. And so maybe if you want to just mention what natto is and why it's different from Koji, and then sprinkle in a little science into our discussion here.
Sure. Well, I have to admit that when Rich first invited me to be on this panel, I was like, well, I'm really not a Koji person. I've just started dabbling with Koji very recently with this product that I mentioned earlier, Koji Natto. My main focus or area of expertise is in making natto, which is a bacterial ferment. It's a soybean ferment using Bacillus subtilis, a bacteria. So Koji is actually, practically speaking, a new area for me. Both funguses, fungi, and bacteria are used for many different kinds of ferments around the world. But they're both microorganisms, but biologically they're actually quite different. They belong to entirely separate kingdoms of classification. So practically speaking, Aspergillus and other fungi are much bigger than bacteria. They're more complex, complicated structure and function, so they grow slower. But because they're so much bigger, they may appear to grow faster because you can just see them more easily. They're maybe 10, 50 times bigger than the typical bacteria. But Koji, or Aspergillus oryzae, is a particularly cute fungus. It's my favorite fungus visually. So this is a little cartoon of the structure of the fruiting body of an Aspergillus fungus. So the very top, it has a really cute big head of hair. So the visible fuzz, that white fuzz or different colored fuzz, the peachy fuzz that you see growing on your Koji product is actually a layer of millions or billions of these fruiting bodies that stick up into the air. And to expose these little strings of spores that are just waiting to be released, so that the Koji can propagate itself. Sort of like a field of corn with all the tassels, hanging out on top, just waiting to spread their pollen. Same thing, really. But the real business that we're all interested in is what goes on underneath. So underneath that stalk is this whole network of filaments. And that's the part that's like actually growing on your substrate, your rice or your soybeans or other legumes, and like burrowing into it. And that's the part where the secretion of all those enzymes that make that delicious magic happen, the proteases that are breaking down the proteins into amino acids, the amylases that are breaking apart those starches into pure sugars, the lipases taking apart the fat, like all of these metabolites that are being secreted down here into the food or breaking that food down so the fungus can eat it. but then we can eat it too. But those flavors are all just a product of this incredible array of enzymes that Aspergillus is super good at making and throwing out there into the environment. So it's a very special fungus. But it's funny, Bacillus subtilis, the natto bacteria, and Aspergillus oryzae, Koji fungus, have often thought, many people think of them as being kind of enemies, or at least frenemies, because really when it comes down to it, if the two of them are mixed together, like in equal proportions head to head, they'll fight with one another. And personally, I think that Bacillus probably would win for the reasons I said earlier, just because it's smaller and it can grow faster. So head to head, Bacillus would probably win. So a lot of you koji makers may have had the experience of having Bacillus subtilis contaminate your koji. Have people had that happen?
And
yeah, it's happened to me before.
Yeah.
And it actually came out really delicious.
yeah.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah, it got all stringy like natto.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll just try it.
Yeah.
We will all eat anything.
It was great because
mean,
it grew, it grew some koji on it, and then basically it got too wet, and then all this like the stringiness and the slime took over, and I was like, this looks like natto.
Yeah.
And I was just like,
but
cool.
mellowed out and like sweeter and more full of umami, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, for sure.
that's basically what this koji natto is. But I'll tell you, the funny thing is that in Japan, yeah.
It sounds like in my experience too, like Rich was saying, like, and you just said like mellower and sweeter. So it's almost, it's totally a gateway drug.
Yeah, I agree. So
marijuana to the heroin, even though that's but it's like, yeah, it got me to actually really enjoy natto without having to like, christening
koji natto.
Wow.
In the book, they've got like a brownie recipe for putting natto in to get your body to crave it, your microbiome, so you can actually tolerate and find it palatable to just eat natto, which is relatively difficult, especially for Western palates. But yeah, this like koji natto mashup, that works just as well as like the brownies.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, it almost tastes like, I don't know,
another drug vehicle.
Something like it's that good, sort of natto with teriyaki sauce. But yeah, traditionally in Japan, most people thought like the two of these ingredients should never meet. In fact, traditional koji and miso and sake makers were forbidden from bringing natto into their factories. Sometimes they were even forbidden from eating it for breakfast before going to work. They were that scared of the two mixing. But yeah, sometimes you just gotta go with the rules and you find something delicious, right?
Yeah, on the flip side, like in Korea and a lot of China, like they don't care. Like Miju, like Bacillus subtilis and Aspergillus oryzae are on a Miju culture. They're there. They let it fight it out. They let it get funky. It's super interesting to see all these cultures in Asia and how they work with these microbes. And like you said, the Japanese are so stringent and strict with keeping them separated. Yet the Koreans and a lot of parts of China and even throughout the Philippines and Indonesia, they're like, no, let's
get party.
Yeah. It's really interesting seeing, and I almost wonder like why one culture was like, let's let them get together and have fun and do it, and we like it this way, and another culture was like, no, that's improper, it shouldn't happen, it's impure. It's super interesting, that evolutionary aspect.
Yeah.
I mean,
you guys have a great chart. Go ahead.
Admittedly, when these two guys meet, it can be difficult to extract them because they're both spore-forming organisms, even though they're, otherwise quite different. So, a contamination of bacillus in an otherwise bacillus-free koji factory would be really hard to get rid of, and vice versa. So, yeah, I guess that's the reasoning.
So, Anne, the Koji Natto, can folks buy that on your website?
Yes, we are making it really in small batch, but we do sell it on our website. Yes, and it is truly delicious, and like Jeremy said, a great gateway natto for sure.
Gateway natto, I love it. Yeah, well, thank you so much for that mini lesson on koji. That was really unexpected and fabulous. So thank you. We're gonna have to chop that and pull it out of the recording because it was really good. Yeah. So NYrture Natto, right? Is the band, and so
NYrture.
Yeah, NYrture. If somebody wants to drop a link to that in the chat, check out Anne's website. And the Koji Natto's on there. I want to, if in our remaining time before Q&A, jump over to Cheryl. Cheryl, I've known for the last, 3 years. You've come to the Berkshire Fermentation Festival.
I've been 4 years.
4 years running. So Cheryl, I know as like the festival fermentation educator who just travels all around the region and North America teaching at Ferment Fests and also teaching at NYC. So I'm wondering if you share a little bit about your teaching experience, and also you're a part of the NYC Ferments community that put on this webinar. If you want to talk a little bit about what the community is like in New York City.
Yeah, so it's funny, going backwards, I was kind of thinking about it because it's like when I met Rich, he's always sort of coined this hashtag Koji Builds Community. And when you think about fermentation, it's like when I started fermenting, I didn't know anybody in fermentation. I had no fermentation friends. It was this weird thing that I was dabbling in. All my friends are like, you have lost your shit. What is going on? And then like I met a few other people not in New York City, like on the other side of the country, who I sort of befriended. And then eventually I found the NYC Ferments community. And, and that was like my real sort of introduction into, I think, having a community of fermenters and people who were as equally minded in food and, food security and, thinking about, using microbes and fungi and yeasts and, things to transform food. The NYC Fermentation Meetup Group meets, NYC Ferments meets on the first Monday of the month. And it's just a posse of people who show up. We usually have a theme or something to go with it. And you make something that falls within that theme. And if you don't bring anything, that's okay. And if you make something that's not in the theme, that's okay too. Just show up. And, it's really fun. We have this, consistent group of, 20, 30, 40 people show up every month and, grab a drink at the bar. We usually meet at Fifth Hammer Brewing, but because of COVID, we've all been meeting online and having online fermentation group though. And it's been a blast, and that our community is sort of holding strong. So, that's the NYC Ferments crew. You can check us out on Meetup. If you look up NYC Ferments, you can sign up for the mailing list. And then, sorry, what was the rest of your question? It was a big question.
It's huge question.
My bandwidth is like small.
Yeah, I mean, you're in NYC, and are you still teaching during the pandemic?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously everything in person was canceled, and a lot of festivals and some keynoting and some stuff like that. But at contrabandferments.com, you can, go to our website. There's like a social distancing sort of page, and we've just been putting workshops up every week. And our home base is a place called the Brooklyn Brainery, and has been for many years. And So, you know, we've been doing a ton of workshops with them, and it's keeping them alive and it's keeping us alive. And, you know, I think it's been really fantastic times. It's like what I'm seeing is a lot of people taking repeat classes, a lot of people who are new to fermentation, and a lot of people who are already into fermentation. And it's like you're starting to see sort of all these gaps, or people who are trying to get into cooking, and this seemed weirdly less scary than learning how to like roast a chicken, you know. Like I'm like, great, grow microbes, you know. But I think there was already this wave of people coming back to food, and what I'm seeing in workshops is that wave is expanding, and people are sort of scratching their heads more and being like, hey, you know, what's up? And, you know, and it's all kinds of fermentation and tempeh making and playing with koji and miso and amazake, and, you know, just like really just expanding their thinking. It's been an exciting time for fermentation in general. And I think weirdly, this has made it an even more exciting time in a way, you know, that, you know, it's just this bigger pot in awareness. And these old practices, like these are practices that have been going on for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And like, you know, like why in traditions, and why, you know, why get away from things that are amazing and do such good benefit, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're still teaching. So check out Contraband Ferments, and do some virtual workshops with Cheryl. She's a great teacher.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, in our last few minutes, I want to open it up for a Q&A. I was kind of trawling through the questions and saw a good one here. This is from Jake Draves. I'd love to hear about the panelists' light bulb moment when they realized that koji wasn't just a typical ingredient like pasta or potatoes, but something of a game changer. Anyone have a good light bulb moment? Cheryl?
Oh my God, I was really into koji. I was so super interested. Mark and I were constantly obsessively texting each other about koji for like months. And finally, I've been trying to go to one of Rich's workshops for like 2 years. And finally, Rich just messaged me one day. He's like, look, just come to Boston. Come and do this workshop already. It's like, all right. So I made it work. I came to Boston. I went to his workshop. But, you know, I kind of left with my brain like exploding. And like, I just remember like walking and like having this epiphany of like beyond pasta, beyond cookies, beyond like, all of a sudden it was like I'm just ranting off like food groups like out loud as I'm walking back to the bus to New York. And I remember being on this bus coming back to New York City and being like unable to stop thinking about all the things that I could potentially grow koji on. And then watching like Jeremy's TED Talk again, and then, you know, just like and also and it's been an entire like another year and a half just obsessed, dreaming about koji, like racing out of my bedroom in the morning to go check my incubator, like, you know, just like completely full chaos. So it's magical when you get into, you know, using it and thinking about it. And you know, I feel like I never stop being surprised by what you can do.
Awesome. Any other light bulb moments?
I'll chime in here. I think for me, it was, you know, when I was first asked to start working with koji to make some miso for somebody or an amino paste, the first time I smelled fresh growing koji that I had grown myself, that was it. Because previously I was sourcing like, you know, the dried packets you can find on the internet and using those to make things. And, you know, I got to a point where that was A, too expensive, and B, just things weren't coming out as good as I thought they could. So the first time I actually smelled koji growing and kind of interacted with its living essence was huge for me. Yeah, at that point too, I had already been working with wild fungi as a licensed wild mushroom expert for years, and using like wild capture techniques. So taking wild edible fungi out of the wild and bringing them into a more cultivated, domesticated setting. So I already had a lot of experience with like how these organisms live and how they grow and what they do when they're growing, and how they look, how they smell, and in some cases how they taste. And this mold was completely different from all that. Like, so much so that my eyes just, like, I smelled it and my eyes popped open. I was like, I couldn't imagine that any type of fungi outside of a yeast could, you know, produce aromas like this or taste like this. It was just like, wow.
Mm-hmm. Light bulb moments. Rich, sounds like you have one.
Yeah. So for me, my light bulb moment was just, you know, in terms of koji and the applications, it's just this crazy starting point of a transformative process. And even if you're not doing anything with koji, it's constantly changing. And it's the things that we do to add to it, to kind of persuade it to go into different directions. And I think that was, for me, the coolest thing about it, is because you could either go into a sweet direction or a savory direction. And it just mattered, you know, whether you use some salt and some protein and you can get some umami on it, or if you just went the other way and just added some starch and you nurtured the sugar conversion to be able to start, you know, working into the sort of, you know, what folks refer to as just like natural fermentation processes, where you start with, you know, lactobacillus and yeast, and then then you create lactic acid, and that tastes pretty delicious. And then you have the yeast that converts, you know, the sugars into alcohol, and then you have this delicious drink, and then ultimately it becomes vinegar. So the fact that koji is constantly changing and we can kind of veer it in a direction by adding different ingredients or even not, is one of the most phenomenal things ever. And there's no other ingredient you can do this with, because it's the enzymes that really power it. And I don't know, you can't find a microbe that does these sorts of things at this magnitude with this many enzymes. And that's what really drew me in. It's like, I get to play, and I'm not limited by it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And do you have a light bulb moment with koji?
Yeah, just a little short and sweet one. For me, it was quite some time back. I went to Japan and I was visiting a distant relative I'd never met before, and she had me over her house and served me this just delicious beverage, amazake, which I'd never had before in my life. You know, I was like, oh, what is this? It's sort of like horchata. Is it like a kalpis kind of thing? But yeah, it was amazake, and she was making it herself, and she showed me. Actually, she was about to make a new batch. She showed me how it was done, just so simple, you know, just throwing some koji into a batch of rice and adding some water. And then, you know, she says, tomorrow it will be like this. And I was just, I never, up till that point, I'd always thought of fermented foods as like having more funky, savory, you know, complex tastes. And just that pure sweetness of it was a surprise to me. So I made her give me some of that batch that she had just mixed together, that she promised would taste just like what I had drunk the next day, because I kind of didn't believe her. So I took some of it home and let it sit until the next day in the fridge, and sure enough, it worked, and it was truly magical. So yeah, I was blown away.
Awesome. That's a great story. Yeah. So I want to move us along to get
But Mark,
question.
you haven't told us your light bulb moment.
Oh yeah. Let me see. I think is a lot of resonance with what Jeremy said. The first time I smelled fresh koji was pretty awesome. I think definitely attending your workshop in Boston though, and tasting some of the things you guys had, specifically the yogurt hot sauce, blew my mind. It was crazy. I still, literally right now, my mouth is watering because of how intense the memory is of my mouth watering when I tried the yogurt hot sauce. because of how much umami there was in there. And I was psyched to see that there's the recipe for it in the book. So super cool. So yeah, you were my light bulb moment, like many other people. So there's a question at the top here. For commercial restaurants, has there been any issues with the health department? Could you explain what the requirements are? Maybe also riffing on that, talking about food safety here, for people at home or in the restaurant, what are the basic, we're growing a mold, why are we growing mold? Shouldn't we be avoiding it?
I'll jump in here for restaurants. And this applies to, food safety in general is the most important thing there is. That's literally why we have a whole appendice devoted to it in the book. We also have a breakdown of how to wash your hands properly. Because that Rich and I, through our discussions, that was like one of the number one things, even culinarians, we would just see people wash their hands for like 5 seconds, 10 seconds maybe, and then, run away and do something. It's like, no, like you need to get a full 20 seconds in there, like count it out. Everything around you can wait, the stuff in the pan isn't going to burn. And if it is, yell to somebody while you wash your hand and move the pan. Like the customer can wait 20 seconds so that you don't potentially sicken them and maybe even kill them. Like it's important. And it's the first line of defense and the foremost thing in your home and in your restaurant. So that's important to keep in mind. It doesn't end at the restaurant door. It's still in your home kitchen too. This is so important. Which I don't know why people design homes where there's a bathroom in the kitchen. That's like, right? Most people's homes have like a bathroom like right off the kitchen. That does not make sense to me. That's like horrible. Anyways, in terms of the health department, so this is a really big question. And what it boils down to, I wish I could give you a more clear answer than this, Brian, is it depends on your jurisdiction. It depends what health department you are working with. And you'll notice there's different regulations with your local jurisdiction, your state, and with federal. And, we're talking about something that people use internationally. In some place like Japan or China, like they don't really have an issue with koji whatsoever. It's normalized. It's such an underpinning of their culture and the society that there's no concerns and worries. In the Western world, people don't even know about it. And in some cases, they don't even question what it is or ask what it is or what you're doing because there's no frame of reference. So it depends on the jurisdiction you're working with. From a liability standpoint, do everything you can to work on and develop your own HACCP plans that are reflective of the rules and regulations in your area. That can involve, some monetary resources. Like we, at Larder worked really closely with Kellerman Consulting in Columbus, Ohio. They do work nationwide and they're pretty well versed. They get a lot of clients from New York and California, some of the more, New York City specifically in California, some of the more stringent jurisdictions in the country. And we profile them in the book, and Brian Kellerman actually contributed an essay about the beauty of food safety and why it's so important in here. You may have to work with, a group like them and spend, a few $100s, $500 developing a HACCP plan that you have in place. As time goes on too, hopefully some of this information is going to be open source and very cookie cutter, and you're going to be able to plug your operation right into it. But for the time being, that's the best info I can give you. It's our food safety laws in the United States. A lot of them are rooted in and date back to the Controlled Substances Act, of the 1930s. It is 2020. They're almost 100 years old. A lot has happened in how we produce food, what we're doing with food, our scientific understanding, our cultural context for food, all of these things. And the food safety laws haven't really caught up that much. Some of the more recent ones are 50 years old and from the 1970s at this point. So there's a lot of what ifs out there. Pardon me. So, you know, if your health department is asking questions, be open with them and let them know what you're doing. Ask how you can do this and find a way to do it. There is a lot of established science out there and a lot of easily accessible, I forget what they call it, existing caseload or whatever it is, documented science about the safety of it. The FDA, USDA say it's a GRAS ingredient, that generally recognized as safe ingredient. So it is approved for use in food service settings. It's just a matter of if your health department is going to require you to have a HACCP to grow with it, and also a HACCP to use it to produce fermented food. Now, in other applications, like if you were buying in Shio Koji or Amazaki from an approved supplier and then marinating your meat in it and cooking it to, like, there's nothing there that's against any health code restriction or anything like that. Or buying fresh koji from like a miso company or that sort of thing, and use not fermenting with it, but using it to enhance flavors and take advantage of its enzymes in other ways. You know, there are these, I don't want to call them loopholes or gray areas, but there's ways that you can use it, plenty of ways that you can use it, that you don't run afoul of your health department, you don't break any laws, and you know, that you can just go ahead and do it. So it's a big open mess, essentially. And essentially just be safe, do what is safe, and have open conversations with those people that are inspecting you. You know, just be open about it. I hope that helps. I know it's a little frustrating, like I might have to develop a HACCP plan, or, you know, or I have to talk to my health inspectors, these sorts of things. But the more of us that do it and the more we get the ball rolling, the less we'll have to have these conversations in the future. So part of it is about setting up the framework for future chefs and restaurateurs and even, you know, cottage industry people and homemakers and everybody. So the more of us that do it, the better. And that's
Awesome.
That was a lot.
Yeah. Well, if folks want to learn more, I definitely encourage you to check out the book because there is a lot of information in there specifically on food safety. So that's great. I think we are at time. I'm not sure if Chelsea's going to pop in. Hello, there you are.
Hi.
Perfect.
Yeah, hi everyone. I just want to say thank you again to all of our panelists for coming out tonight and for this amazing conversation. A reminder to folks in the audience that you can buy Koji Alchemy through Greenlight Bookstore. And if you buy by May 15th, you can get $5 off with code KOJI, K-O-J-I. And also a reminder that tonight's event has been recorded, so you may find portions of it on our website or on our social channels later on. Yeah, have a great evening, everyone. Is there last things our panelists would like to say?
Can everyone rapidly say their next Koji project? Not at the same time. Rich, go for it. Next Koji project.
Next Koji project? I don't know, really. I guess I've been playing a lot with just, you know, understanding more about how wild rice is creating all these amazing flavors and aromas. And I just probably want to try to find some locally or connect with somebody who's actually foraging it.
Awesome. Wild rice Koji. Jeremy.
So before I get into like future working things, I do want to say anybody who, you know, your question is outstanding. Listen, I know me, Mark, Cheryl, Rich, and we haven't interacted too much, but you know, a lot of us are very available on social media and that sort of thing. So feel free to send us an email, hit us up through our website or Instagram or Facebook, however you can connect with us. And, you know, we can help you answer some questions that may be outstanding. So with that said, one of my huge focuses that I've been kind of working on for a little bit with Christopher Ron here in Cleveland, who's one of the proprietors of Phoenix Coffee and is a brilliant coffee and chocolate sommelier, or I'm not sure exactly. Sorry, Chris, if you're watching, what they call experts in that. And Koichi Higuchi of Higuchi Matsuno Soken Shoten in Japan, a koji spore producer. We're doing some really intensive work, and we have been for almost a year now, on coffee, green beans, and creating something hopefully that's like Kuala Lumpur, like civet coffee, without an animal having to poop it out. And also Chris and I have been sourcing cacao pods, and we've been starting to do some work looking into some things there. So I really feel that there's some really, really big revolutions coming both in coffee production and chocolate production, using some type of koji, whether it's Aspergillus oryzae proper or one of the associate species or a different filamentous mold, and harnessing that more than some of the traditional bacterial and aceto fermentation techniques that happen with those productions. So that's a huge focus. We're also trying to identify how to use all the waste from those industries. So the coffee cherry, the flesh from the cacao beans, the pods, how we can use filamentous molds to create added value programs for essentially third world farmers to help bring them up and lift them up too. So that project is super exciting. So
very cool. A lot on your plate, clearly. Never stop. Cheryl, do you want to share?
What am I doing with koji next? I mean, I'm definitely thinking more about like proper charcuterie. Jeremy's got me pretty in my head about that. And then back in January, I was at Preserving Abundance in Atlanta, Julia Skinner's event, and I was teaching, and Kirsten Shockey and I did a koji workshop together, and she has been growing koji spores on like purple sweet potatoes and turning it into vinegar, and brought me some, and it was insane. And I'm like, I think that's a next goal. It's been on my
awesome
radar.
Can't wait to see it. Ann?
Well, I think we've been playing a little bit with some alternative nattos, so making natto out of other legumes. But I've found that, a lot of them just don't have the depth of flavor that the soybean-based natto does. But having been really psyched about how the natto koji went, maybe combining the koji with some of these alternate nattos would be a really interesting experiment. Yeah. Thanks for asking that question, because you pulled that idea out of me.
There we go. You can send me a commission.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been so interesting. Yeah, you guys are all doing great stuff.
Thank you for being a great moderator.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah.
Nice work.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, we'll see everybody on social media and Instagram. # everything Koji Builds Community, and share your projects with the world.
And Greenlight has other books besides this too.
It's true. Greenlight Bookstore. Please go on their website.
Yeah, you can buy like a lot of books from them.
Yeah. So you can buy like 10 Koji books and give them all to your friends.
Yeah.
Right.
They have it all, guys. Like seriously, Greenlight has like always has a really good stash of fermentation books along with other books. So it's a good place to source from.
Yeah, Mother's Day is this weekend. Just saying.
Yeah.
You pretend to be a mother and gift yourself.
Not not that like your mother needs more romance in her life, but romance novels. Like it's all good reading, and mom loves
Koji Alchemy.
That's it.
That's what this book is. It's you and Rich's romance novel.
That is our baby.
It's your bromance novel.
Oh man.
The birthing process.
Oh my gosh.
I don't even know what our kid will look like.
What do you call that, Rich? A Jasian?
Damn you. All right, I think we're done.
Thank you so much
All right,
again,
thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Yeah, have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Goodbye.